The next morning, everything continued as if nothing had changed. She moved through the kitchen with the same calm efficiency, slicing fruit, loading the dishwasher, typing rapid emails with one hand while sipping coffee with the other. She had slipped into a mask so quickly I almost doubted the night before it happened. She asked if I needed anything from the store. I said no. She reminded me to call the electrician. I nodded. She kissed me lightly on the cheek as she stepped into her shoes by the door, mechanical, empty, obligatory. The kiss felt like the gentle press of an envelope sealing shut. When the door closed behind her, I stood in the kitchen for a long time, staring at the backsplash she insisted on installing last year. I remembered how proud she was of choosing the color, fog blue, she had called it. I had never seen fog that color, but I said it was perfect. She smiled then, a genuine smile. That was 14 months ago. There had been a moment around that time when she started going silent during dinners. Not cold, just less present. She would smile when I looked up, nod when I talked, but her eyes stayed just a little too focused on the table. At first I assumed it was work stress, something she would decompress from in her own time. Then the calendar entries started multiplying. Meetings, vendor follow-ups, outreach calls. Nothing suspicious on its own, just a slow growth of distance hidden in plain sight. I never believed in looking through her phone, not out of virtue, out of pride. If someone wanted to betray you, the last thing they deserved was your permission to prove it. But I noticed she had begun leaving it face down. Always face down. She used to leave it on the charger near the fridge, but now it traveled with her from room to room, like a relic too sacred for anyone else's gaze. I remembered her laughter once. It used to start low and rise up suddenly, bubbling out at bad movies or awkward dinner parties. Lately it had become silent smiles, half-curved, like someone remembering the idea of laughter without the impulse to make sound. People do not vanish all at once. They turn translucent in pieces. That afternoon I walked into her home office for the first time in weeks. She had grown territorial about it recently, claimed she needed mental boundaries. I had respected that. Stupidly. Everything looked normal, too normal. Desk perfectly organized, a scented candle half burned, a closed laptop beside a stack of marketing brochures for a brand I had never heard of. I stood there a while, not touching anything, just looking. The room felt curated, not lived in, staged, like she had prepared it for someone to see it and believe a story about who she was. There was a feeling I could not quite name, not dread, not suspicion, something colder, calculation. She did not love me anymore. That much I accepted. But she wanted me to respond in a specific way. She wanted me to fold, to lash out, to hand her the kind of reaction that justified a clean escape. And that told me everything I needed to know. This was not over. It had barely started. 3 days passed. I watched her move through the house with the serenity of a stage actress who had already blocked every scene. She spoke gently, offered smiles that never touched her eyes, and maintained routines with the grace of someone who had already exited emotionally and was now only tying up the logistics. I played my part in silence. I matched her calm word for word, gesture for gesture. Not out of mutual respect, out of strategy. The moment she believed I had accepted her sentence as the end, she would lower her guard. And I needed her guard down. On the 4th evening, I was in the den reviewing old contracts when I noticed a stack of books on the side table. These were not hers. Hardcover business memoirs, most of them untouched. She had always found them dull. I picked one up out of curiosity, flipped through its pages. About halfway in, something slipped out and landed on the carpet with a soft pat. A folded card, not sealed, handwritten. I crouched and turned it over. No address. Just the letter E scrawled in confident, hurried cursive across the front. It was not my handwriting, and it was not hers. The card was a thank you note. Inside, the words were casual but familiar, too familiar. Thanks again for smoothing things over with QLS. No way they would have trusted me without your internal push. Let me know when we can finish phase 2. Dinner soon. There was no signature, just a looping initial again. E. I read it twice, then a third time. The name QLS rang too clearly. They were a client of ours, or had been. I had been in negotiations with them nearly 2 months earlier. Everything was tracking until they suddenly ghosted. No call, no email, no response. I had asked her about it at the time. She had shrugged. Maybe they went with someone cheaper, she said, eyes on her laptop. Happens, apparently not. This note confirmed two things. First, someone named E had closed the deal. Second, he had done so with her help. I slid the card back between the pages of the book and placed it exactly where I found it. Then I walked slowly to her office, not to confront, just to observe. Her door was closed but not locked. I stood outside and listened. No sound, no typing, no talking. I waited, then knocked lightly. She opened the door a few seconds later, a controlled smile on her face. "Hey," she said, "need something?" I looked past her for a moment. Her laptop screen was dark. Her phone, however, was in her hand, gripped tightly, her thumb still resting against the side button as if she had just locked it. "Just seeing if you wanted coffee," I said, voice even. She nodded. "I could use one, thanks." When I returned with the mugs, she had already resumed her screen work, two browser windows open, one of them a private project management dashboard I had never seen before. I placed the mug beside her without speaking. She thanked me, eyes not leaving the screen. That night I made two quiet decisions. First, I would not look through her devices. That was reactive, predictable. Second, I would learn everything she thought I was too oblivious to notice. The next morning I left earlier than usual under the excuse of needing to drop off a proposal downtown. Instead, I parked 2 blocks away and waited. She left the house 40 minutes later in jeans, boots, and the beige trench coat she almost never wore. I watched her from across the street, my car parked just outside the bakery. She walked 2 blocks east, turned left, and entered a cafe she had never once mentioned. Not to me, not to anyone I could recall. A place too upscale for casual errands, too quiet for working lunches. The kind of place people went when they did not want to be seen by the wrong people, but wanted to be noticed by the right ones. I waited 15 minutes before stepping out and walking past. Not inside, just past. Through the glass I could see her at a corner table, seated across from a man I had never seen. Mid-30s, too well dressed for a casual meeting, leaning in slightly as he spoke. She laughed, really laughed, head tilted back, eyes warm. I had not seen that version of her in a year. I kept walking. No photos, no confrontation, not yet. Information was only valuable when they believed you had none. That night she came home with a new energy. She hummed to herself while removing her coat. Asked if I had eaten, offered to warm up some leftovers. I told her I had already eaten at the office. She smiled. "Big day, productive," I said. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "I meant what I said, by the way, about us. I think it is better if we figure out a path forward that works for both of us." I nodded, letting her think I was listening. "I agree." Her relief was visible. She mistook quiet for surrender. That was the mistake. She had made hers. I would make mine count. The man from the cafe became my starting point. Not his face, not his name, I did not need those yet. What I needed was his shape in the story, his place in her ecosystem, and he gave it away in seconds without realizing it. He leaned in when he spoke, not flirtatious, confidential. That meant trust. That meant he knew something she did not want repeated. His jacket was pressed, but the shoes were scuffed, details that spoke of ambition outpacing polish. The kind of man who needed her for more than companionship. This was not just someone she was seeing. This was someone she was building something with. And if that was true, then pieces of it would already be in motion. That night after she fell asleep, I sat in the den with an old-fashioned pad of paper and a pen. No laptops, no logins, just memory. I wrote down every name of every client that had drifted in the past 8 months. Every partnership that had quietly dissolved without confrontation, every proposal that was delayed, declined, or put on hold with no follow-up. 10 names, 6 companies. One of them, QLS, had sent a thank you card to her. 2 of them had required her to sit in for me during early conversations because I had been traveling. At the time, I appreciated the initiative. In hindsight, I had handed her the keys. I began cross-referencing timelines. The meetings she took on my behalf. The days she had consulting brunches she claimed were unrelated. The travel dates that had not matched my calendar but had not raised flags then. Patterns formed faster than I expected. She had been moving pieces long before she moved her lips to say, "I do not love you anymore." 3 days later, I had a lead. A former assistant from one of the client companies I remembered, Landmark Axis, called to ask about a billing error. She thought she had reached our accounting team. She had not realized the contract had been reassigned. I told her I would check and call back. I did not. Instead, I researched the new contract holder, a boutique strategy firm operating under a name I had only heard once before in a side comment she made at dinner months ago. The owner was a man named Evan Langley. It was not the name I was expecting, but it was the same man I saw in the cafe. It took me less than an hour to confirm it. I found a public image from a business event online. Same man, same posture, same leaning and expression. Only this time he was smiling with two fingers resting gently against her shoulder in the photo captioned, Langley and Davis Strategic Growth Panel. Davis was her maiden name. She had been speaking under it professionally, and she had not told me. It would have been easy to react then, to drive to his office, to call her out, to send screenshots and demand explanations. But there is no strategy in explosion. Strategy lives in stillness, so I kept quiet. I returned to the den. I began printing copies of every public-facing file I could find about Langley's company. I printed the thank you note I had scanned with my phone when she was not looking. I clipped them together. I added the business panel photo. I slid it all into a manila folder and labeled it in pen, Langley. Not for drama, for documentation. She believed I was stunned and passive. She believed I would crumble, file for separation, and let her keep her secrets intact while I bled privately. What she did not know was that she had not just picked the wrong man, she had picked the wrong business partner. Later that evening, we ate dinner in silence. She asked about my day. I told her I spent most of it clearing out the storage drive. It was not a lie. She nodded, not pressing further. She had already begun to disengage from the theater of shared curiosity. After dinner, she poured herself a glass of wine and sat in the living room scrolling her phone with practiced disinterest. I walked past her and paused at the bookshelf, pulling out the same book where the card from E had been hidden. I flipped through it slowly. She did not look up. When I reached the midpoint and found it gone, I closed the book and returned it to the shelf. I said nothing. She sipped her wine and continued scrolling, eyes cool and confident. She had found the card missing. She had removed it. She thought she was being watched, and now she would begin making mistakes. By the end of the week, she had changed passwords on her devices, reorganized her workspace, and begun locking her home office door at night. These were not the actions of someone who felt guilty. They were the habits of someone protecting an operation. Let her protect it. I already knew where it led. I waited until Saturday morning when she left for what she called her wellness walk. Her phone stayed in her back pocket and the beige trench coat was back, same one from the cafe. Same careful disguise of intention. As soon as the front door closed, I walked directly to the dining room cabinet, not her office, not her laptop. That would have been expected. I chose the drawer she once called her catch-all, a cluttered array of stationery, office extras, and mail she never sorted. And there it was, an envelope marked backup. Inside were printed agreements. Pages clipped together, partially highlighted, with company letterheads I recognized, but details I did not. The most important one bore the name E. Langley Consulting, LLC. It was a signed contract between his company and a client I had personally brought in 18 months earlier. Only this document did not list me or my firm. It listed her as an independent strategy liaison. Her signature, clean and deliberate, was next to a client I had once helped rescue from insolvency. The effective date, 2 months before she told me she did not love me anymore. But what stopped me cold was the last page. A scanned signature of mine, except I never signed it. It was not just a betrayal. It was a setup. I sat down slowly, the paper light in my hand, but weighted with clarity. She had falsified my signature. Added it beneath a role I had never agreed to for a company I had never worked with through her. If anything went wrong, if Langley's firm tanked or legal issues emerged, I would be listed on record as a responsible party. This was not just about leaving me. This was about undoing me. I folded the pages and placed them in a new folder. I marked the top, false attribution. I did not touch anything else. I left the envelope in its place, positioned exactly as it had been. She would not know I had seen it. That was crucial. She returned 90 minutes later with a green smoothie and flushed cheeks. "You would not believe how packed the trail was," she said cheerfully as she unzipped her coat. I smiled gently and asked if she needed help with lunch. She said no, gave me a kiss on the shoulder and disappeared into the office again. An hour later, I heard the door lock click behind her. She was preparing to finalize something. Maybe exit terms, maybe a legal submission. But now I had a copy of her signature next to mine, and a forensic handwriting specialist on retainer from a case I had managed last year. That evening I sent an email, not to her, to an old contact in our legal circle. I requested a quiet consultation regarding signature forensics under the pretense of internal audit protection. No emotion, no panic, just documentation. By Monday, things began to shift in her tone. She was warmer. She asked if I had time to talk about what happens next. I told her I would prefer to finish the quarter first, that we owed it to ourselves to close things cleanly. She agreed too quickly. That confirmed everything. She wanted me to exit the business, cleanly, quietly, quickly. I asked if she would be willing to handle the landmark Axis handoff. Her eyes flickered. Sure, she said carefully. I still have their contact. I smiled. Of course you do, she paused. Is something wrong? Not at all, I said. I trust you. And in that sentence I saw something flicker behind her smile. Not guilt, fear, not of exposure, not yet, but fear that I was not as broken as she hoped. I was not. I was watching. I was listening. And now I had proof that she had put a knife in my back and carved my name into the handle. The email came on a Wednesday evening. Short, polite, carefully neutral. If you are open to it, I would like to sit down this weekend to talk. Just the two of us. No lawyers, no tension. Just a clear, adult conversation. Maybe dinner. I read it twice, once with curiosity, once with calculation. She wanted dinner, not because she missed me, not because she had second thoughts. She wanted dinner because she thought she had won. People do not invite the losing side to negotiate unless they believe the pieces are already secure. Her warmth was not reconciliation. It was cleanup. Closure delivered with charm to make the narrative easy to swallow when she told it later. I agreed. I offered a restaurant we both used to frequent downtown. Private booths, excellent wine list, quiet waitstaff who never hovered. She accepted immediately. The next day I assembled 3 folders. One contained the original contract with the forged signature. Another held a comparison set of legitimate documents bearing my actual signature across verified deals. The third contained the preliminary report from the handwriting specialist I had contacted, a trusted colleague whose findings were clear. The signature on the Langley contract did not match mine. It had been added digitally, pasted from a scan. I added one final page to the stack, an email from a client who had pulled back from us 3 months earlier. He had agreed off the record to confirm that it was Langley's firm who had stepped in. That email was time-stamped. It aligned perfectly with her calendar entries from the same week, entries that included coffee with an old friend and a consulting brunch for network growth. When the night arrived, I dressed simply. No suit, no tie. I did not want to look like I was dressing for court. I wanted to look like a man who no longer needed to perform. She arrived first. I saw her before she saw me, seated near the back wall, phone on the table, wine already ordered. She looked composed, casual, but there was an eagerness in her eyes she could not mask. She believed she was walking into a scene she had written. She stood as I approached. We exchanged polite greetings. She leaned in slightly as if she intended to hug me, then seemed to reconsider. Good, we sat. I appreciate you coming, she said after the first few minutes of surface talk had dissolved. I know this is complicated, but I thought maybe we could talk without tension, just clarity. Clarity is important, I said calmly. I agree. She smiled with relief. I want us to be fair to each other, she continued. I think we can both walk away from this with dignity. No hard feelings, I nodded. Of course, that is why I brought a few things to share, some documentation just to clear up misunderstandings before they start. Her smile faltered. I opened the first folder. I placed the forged contract on the table between us. She glanced down at it and then back at me. I do not understand, she said carefully. This is the contract between Langley's firm and the client I introduced, the one you claimed ghosted us. Your name is on it, so is mine. Her face remained still, but her fingers curled slightly around the base of her wine glass. I do not recall ever seeing that. I slid the second folder across the table. These are signature samples, mine, verified across 10 separate deals. And this, I tapped the final folder, is a preliminary report from a forensic expert. The signature on this contract is a digital lift. You scanned it from an older document, you pasted it. She did not move, I held her gaze. You did not just walk away from the marriage. You attempted to tie a liability around my neck, quietly, without confrontation. You thought I would not check, you thought I would not notice. She opened her mouth, closed it, swallowed. I was trying to protect what I had built, she said finally, voice quiet. He helped, he saw potential. I did what I had to do. No, I said. You did what you thought I would never trace. I stood slowly, collecting the folders. You wanted a clean conversation. This is as clean as it gets. She stayed seated, hands motionless in her lap. As I turned to leave, I paused once, not looking back. You said you did not love me anymore. That part is fine. What you tried to do after that, that is what you will regret. I walked out. I did not wait for a response. The first sign that the ground beneath her had shifted came 2 days after the dinner. She tried to call me, twice. No voicemail, no follow-up message. That told me everything I needed to know. If she had felt in control, she would not have reached out. Control does not chase. I did not answer. Instead, I sent a certified envelope to her attorney's office. Inside was a copy of the forged contract, the expert's preliminary report, and a formal statement indicating that if any liabilities arose from the falsified document, I would pursue full indemnity against both her and Langley's firm. No threats, no rage, just clean, quiet, professional escalation. She had built this version of herself in layers, efficient, composed, pragmatic. But those qualities do not survive scrutiny. They only function when the story stays hidden. And I had taken the story from her. 2 more clients contacted me that week. Each had previously shifted direction without explanation. Now they wanted to talk. One admitted with discomfort that they had been approached through a third party claiming to represent a transition firm formed out of my original brand. The third party, Langley. I asked the client to put that in writing. He did. I added it to the file. By Friday, word had begun to circulate in the professional circle we shared. Quietly, no accusations, no headlines, just discomfort, questions. How had Langley grown so fast? Why were the clients circling back? What was happening with her? People like her build everything on perception, not character, perception. And perception is glass when pressure is applied from the right angle. She showed up at my office that afternoon. No appointment, just walked in. My assistant, who had been with me from the beginning, hesitated at the doorway. She says it is urgent. I nodded. Give us a minute. When she entered, she looked smaller, not physically, but the sharpness had faded. The eyes that once held calculation now held exhaustion. I need to talk to you, she said. You are talking. She sat down without being asked. Her hands trembled slightly, only visible when she reached for the glass of water I had not offered. Langley's firm is under audit, she said. I already knew. There is an issue with filings, she added. With disclosures. He may have involved me more deeply than I realized. She was lying, but only to herself now. What do you want from me? I asked evenly. She looked at me for the first time in weeks with something close to real fear. I need you to understand that I never meant for it to go this far. I made a mistake, a series of them. I nodded. That is true, she breathed in slowly. I was angry, I was tired, I felt invisible. I let that settle, then answered. You erased me on paper instead, she winced. Please do not drag this into court, it will destroy both of us. I opened the drawer beside me, pulled out a sealed envelope and placed it on the table. This is a copy of the full file, contracts, emails, forensic statements. It is already with my attorney. You are free to contest it. She did not touch it. You wanted control, I said. You built a new world and assumed I would collapse beneath it. I did not. Now that world is cracking. That is not my doing, that is yours. She sat for a while, not moving, then stood. Before she left, she said something that surprised me. I thought you would scream, break things, beg. I stood with her, held her gaze. You gave me nothing, I said, so I gave you nothing to miss. She blinked but said nothing more. She walked out without looking back, and I let the silence be my answer. The audit of Langley's firm escalated within a week. 2 clients formally withdrew. One issued a public statement citing concerns over documentation integrity. I had not spoken to them. I had not needed to. People follow stability. And she had chosen to align herself with someone whose foundation was built on deception disguised as charm. A third client contacted me directly, offered to return under my management quietly under a new agreement without backtracking or posturing. They simply wanted out of the mess. I accepted, quietly, cleanly. Her silence grew louder each day. Mutual acquaintances stopped reaching out. A few who had been close to her emailed short, cautious messages. None addressed the real issue, just awkward offers for coffee. I declined all of them. I did not need sympathy from people who had stayed neutral while watching her version of me spread through small, invisible networks. That was the cost of perception. It always asks for payment later. The final blow landed 2 weeks later. I received a legal notice stating that Langley's firm was being placed under formal review was launched over irregularities in documentation and misleading filings. My name, previously attached through her forged document, was formally removed after I submitted the forensic report and client affidavits. It was over, at least the part that had stakes on paper. What remained was the debris. I moved out of the house on a Tuesday morning. Not because I had to, but because I no longer wanted to live among the props of a story that had ended before she admitted it out loud. The dining table where she had delivered her opening line, the office where she had hidden her preparations, the den where I had first realized I no longer trusted the way she said good morning. I took what I needed, left what I did not. No ceremony, no bitterness, just clean lines. I sent her a message through my attorney. The division of assets would proceed according to the revised agreement. She would keep the house. I would keep the firm. No further negotiation. There was no reply. Later that week, I heard from a former colleague who had once called her a genius of quiet influence. He told me Langley had gone silent, his phone disconnected, office emptied. Her name, once featured on promotional materials, had been scrubbed. She had not just lost a business partner. She had lost someone who could verify her version of events, because men like him do not stay loyal when scrutiny comes knocking, and women like her, who rely on silence, smiles, and forged alliances, do not survive without scaffolding. I rebuilt slowly. One client, one meeting, one honest conversation at a time. The house I moved into was small, efficient. No echoes of old performances, just space, clean light, a desk I placed near the window so I could write in the morning. The pain did not vanish. It resurfaced in the quiet moments, folding a shirt she once wore, hearing a song she once hummed absent-mindedly in the car. But the pain no longer dictated what I did next. It simply existed, like a scar, present, healed, but not erased. People asked gently if I was seeing someone. I was not. Not because I feared betrayal, but because I had no interest in staging affection to fill an empty room. I would let the silence stay a little longer. It had been the only honest thing I had heard in months, and I had learned how to listen.